Welcome to the National Shrine of St. Anthony, located here in Cincinnati, Ohio. We're blessed to have you with us here, but we're also blessed to have several audiences around the world who are gathered in front of a computer screen as we live now in this world of Zoom. So I want to extend to all of you my thanks and to welcome you. And we welcome donors, friends, and we want you to recognize with us what Father Murray Bodo has done with this book of Francis, the Journey and the Dream. It's in many languages now, as you can see displayed here. And we also want to thank Brother Vincent, who is in the church pew here, for helping and assisting and working with us on this project. Vince is the director and guardian here of the National Shrine of St. Anthony. So for all of us, our vocation in our lives, our baptismal vocation, is that we are to share and to give to all people what God has given us. In other words, to recognize God's great gift of Christ to us. Do that at Franciscan Media through our books, many of them are Father Murray's, and through our daily email pieces that go out around the world, and through our online videos, which are also available all around the world. We're grateful for your support, your presence today. All of us are trying to really make the vision of Francis and his goodness and love stand out in our world today. We hope to inspire a loving world that embraces the love and the harmony and the joy and simplicity of St. Francis. Today we celebrate with Murray, a book that has touched the hearts, minds, and souls of people all over the world. And we thank you for being here and being there on the screens you are watching now.
Thank you, Father Dan. And again, I extend my welcome to everyone here in person and also tuning in and joining us virtually. What a wonderful place. The National Shrine of St. Anthony, a beautiful space to come together and to celebrate. So thank you for joining us. For many donors of Franciscan Media, this may be the very first time you actually see my face. That has not been attached to an appeal or an invitation to partner with us. And so I am here to say I am real. I am grateful and for everything that you have done for us in sharing God's love through Franciscan Media. And so I'm not just a cartoon or stick figure or anything like that. I'm a real person. So it's great to be with you tonight. This event, this celebration is not possible without your support and your being here. So thank you. I have the great privilege of introducing Father Murray Bodo, Franciscan priest. Father Murray is a teacher, a poet, a spiritual writer, and since 1972, he has written 39 books. Father Murray's poems, stories, and articles have appeared in many magazines and literary journals, including our very own St. Anthony Messenger, Sojourners, the Paris Review, the Cincinnati Review, the Western Humanities Review, and the online London Grip. His most recent book of poetry is Canticle, The Beauty of Art's Intrusion. Among Father Murray's many writings are 11 books of poetry, books on saints, Francis and Clare of Assisi, a book about Brother Juniper, an early companion of St. Francis, and a book of long prose poem about Jesus. Father Murray has also published 3 volumes of Franciscan spirituality, a book of reflections on the Navajo people, a book on Franciscan Father Berard Hale, who is considered one of the most important pioneering ethnologists of the Navajo language and culture, and most recently, the spiritual memoir of Father Murray's own life and spirituality. Father Murray's work has been translated into many languages, as Father Dan mentioned previously, including Japanese, Danish, Portuguese, Maltese, Czech, and Polish. In 2009, he received an honorary doctorate of letters from the Felician College in recognition of his gifts as a poet and his writings of St. Francis. In 2011, St. Bonaventure University awarded Father Murray their 150th medal as Poet Laureate of the Franciscan family. Please join me in welcoming Father Murray.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Dan, and thank you, Franciscan Media, for keeping this little Energizer Bunny book alive. It just seems to keep going. I'm very grateful for that, and I'm very grateful for all of you who are here and those of you who are watching online, and I'm happy to be with you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, tonight we're going to start with an opportunity that Murray may share and expound a little bit about the journey and the dream. And then later on, I'll ask some questions. Some questions that have been submitted by our friends and family at Franciscan Media. And then we may actually get even some poetry later on as well. So stay tuned. Just to let you know that these are just a few of Murray's books. I mean, it's one book, but just translated in many languages. And so these are just a few that I was able to pick off our shelves that we had. And so Murray, I mean, amazing, amazing work. And it's touched millions of people all over the world, I can imagine. Thank you for your gift of this. 1972. It just seems just not too far ago, not too long ago, but it's been 50 years.
50 years.
Amazing. Congratulations on
Thank
writing
you.
a book that
Thank
has
you.
touched the hearts of so many. What was going on in 1972? What was the inspiration that bore fruit to this little book right here?
Well, can you hear me, the ones here? Yeah. I was teaching at the high school seminary, and I was writing poetry on the side, and Father Jeremy Harrington was the editor of the St. Anthony Messenger. Roger Hooser was our provincial, and we knew that they knew, I didn't know, that Franco Zeffirelli was making a movie about St. Francis, which ended up being Brother, Sun, Sister, Moon. And they wanted me to write a popular book that would accompany that movie. It was a very difficult time in my life. I was burnt out, I think, that sort of thing was happening to me. And so I said, well, I have to get some time off. And I was teaching, 5 classes a day, and having spiritual direction in the afternoon and in the evening, helping out in parishes. And they said, oh, no, you'll get time out. And I said, oh, this began to look up. So I said, well, can I go to New Hampshire and write with my writing mentor, who at that time was Donald Murray, since has passed on into eternity. Well, they said, no, Murray, you're going to Assisi. And when they picked me up and put me back in the chair, in those days, you didn't go to Assisi unless you were 25 years or 50 or 100. You just didn't get to travel out that much. So it was hard to say no. And I remember I was, at that time, spiritual director at the high school seminary. And the seminarian came in, and when he was leaving, he said, Father Murray. I said, yes. I never knew what they were going to say when they left. When they left this session, because they always wanted to go on and on and on. And he said, you're going to go on a long journey. It's going to be the fulfillment of one of your dreams. I was blown away. I thought this kid was very curious. I said, he's been listening outside our rec room because none of the students knew about this. I said, how did you know this? And he said, it was in my tarot cards this morning. I said, tarot cards. I think I knew what they were at that time, but I didn't think they were something they should be doing. So that's eventually where the title came from, Francis, the Journey and the Dream. And I was writing the book pretty much for what the audience I knew, who were teenagers, young people. That's how it got started. And in fact, at the end of the writing of the book, I was at the premiere of the movie Brother, Sun, Sister, Moon in Assisi. That's where the premiere was.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. It just goes to show that spiritual direction is very powerful.
It's very powerful.
Very and important in our lives. And so listen to your directors and directors, listen to your directees. You know, you never know how God will work through each of you. 50 years, beautiful words. I would say a poet, you know, your ability to grasp and to articulate, not just, you know, English, but with an Italian flair to it. And I know you traveled and your time in Assisi has definitely borne fruit in your work here.
Yeah.
But your chapters in your book are all named after specific moments in the life of Francis.
Yes. Yeah.
Father Murray, would you be willing to share a story that from your book with us tonight?
Yes. Yes, I'm happy to do that. I was distracted there for a minute.
Okay.
Because I didn't know quite what was coming.
You get
on
ready.
that one.
You know?
So yes, because I saw myself as a poet, I realized when I said yes, and when I got on the plane and was crossing the Atlantic, that I don't know how to write a book. This is really dumb. Can you come back with a book? You know, and it was a frightening thing for me. And when I landed in Rome, there was another priest, a diocesan priest, and we had lunch together. And then there was a siesta somewhere, probably right at the table. And then I took a later train into Assisi, which is north of Rome, halfway between Rome and Florence. And as we moved geographically towards Assisi, I felt I was moving back in time. It was the darndest thing. I felt I'm going back into the Middle Ages. And it's like I knew I was going to be okay because I'm right there with Francis. I'm in the Middle Ages, and all I have to do is look at the people in this town, and I'm going to find Francis. I'm going to find Claire. I'm going to find the brothers. I will see them, and they will be my models. And that's kind of what happened, and every day I was so afraid of writer's block, but every day I would get an idea and I'd start writing, usually in the morning. I still write in the morning, and I'd write all morning, and then in the afternoon I would go out and look for Francis and Claire and the brothers and incidents. But at one point I couldn't get away into the whole mystery of Christmas and Francis at Greccio. Greccio's a little town on the way to Assisi in the area of Rieti. And I said, I don't know how to write this story. And I was getting sick. My one eye was closing. I said, oh my gosh, I have a infection. So I went right to the pharmacist. In Italy, you go to the pharmacist, he can do anything or she can do anything. And so he gave me some salve to put on that I'm sure they used on the wagon wheels of the early travelers to the West. I couldn't get my eye open. I said, I'm going to go blind. The other eye was starting to close, and it was very close. It was very cold. And so I prayed a minute, maybe two, and I said, God and St. Francis would want me to go to the French Riviera where it's warm. So I'm leaving. And I got on the train. I was going to Taizé, to the ecumenical community at Taizé. And when you get on the train and you go to Marseille and you're going up towards Paris, you need to get off at Mâcon. And of course, I was, all agog with my one eye, looking out the window at everything, and I missed the stop and went on to Dijon, where they make that wonderful mustard. So I got off the train there for the night and went to this little mustard restaurant that was in the pensione, the hotel. And while I was sitting there eating my mustard, the door, somebody was trying to get through the door, having an awful time. And the maitre d' went over, opened the door, and a young man came through, physically challenged, in a wheelchair, and pushing him was a young woman in about the same shape. And, so everybody's looking down, they don't want to embarrass them or whatever. And the maitre d' put them right in the center of the restaurant. And they sat down, and food was falling. They couldn't get in, and they were just beaming, smiling, laughing. Pretty soon, the whole restaurant, people are laughing and talking. So I called the maitre d' over, who spoke English, and I said, "What's happening here?" And he said, well, this young couple are on their honeymoon. Well, I was so touched by that. I couldn't even eat any more mustard. I was just so touched, because I knew that neither one of them ever thought that anybody could love me. And then this other person comes into my life, and I don't see my faults and flaws anymore. I only see your love. You love me. That's all that matters. I love you. I have someone to love. And I thought, there's the chapter. So I took my bottle of wine and mustard, went right up to my room, and I knew I had that chapter So I'll just read the first couple paragraphs. So I'm trying to show you the genesis of writing, that something will happen and it registers. So the very first sentence is what I felt when I looked at that couple. Someone to love, someone to care for. It was that thought which gripped Francis's heart at Greccio. That Christmas, he had decided to celebrate the birth of Jesus in a new way. He had brought a real ox and ass to the altar so that they too could share in this rebirth of Christ in the bread and wine of the Christmas Eucharist. At Christmas, it was the infant Christ who was born again in human hearts. And it struck Francis that God came to earth as a baby so that we would have someone to care for. Christmas was the dearest of feasts because it meant that God was now one of us, flesh of our flesh and bone of our bone. This child we could approach without fear. We could be silly and uninhibited as we sought to make him laugh. Don't we all do that? We're in a room and there's a little baby in there and say, what a cute little baby. And then an adult comes in and we go, yes, may I help you? Adultly. We change right away. And Francis, Christ was that real to him. The incarnation was that real to him. He fell in love with that little baby. And so we could be totally ourselves because a child accepts us just as we are and screams with delight at our little performances in his or her behalf. Someone to care for, someone to try to please, someone to love. God, a helpless babe. God, a piece of bread. How much trust God had in creatures. In the Eucharist and in the Nativity, we grow up because God places himself in our care. We come out of ourselves if we are aware, because now we have responsibilities for God. Not only the earth to till and creation to care for, but now God to care for. So those are just two of the paragraphs of that chapter. But it came out of missing the stop at Macon and having to get out of the train at Dijon and having that marvelous experience. I can still see that couple.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Just, it goes to show that God's love abounds, and inspires us
Absolutely.
everywhere. And just, if we're open to seeing it, thank you for sharing that. It's beautiful.
Sure. Thank you.
50 years, we keep talking about 50 years. The story of Francis is not finished yet. There are books of Francis being published almost every day. He's probably one of the most, written about saints or persons in the world. So as we look back at 50 years, did you forget anything, or is there anything that you'd want to add to this great work?
Well,
as you've been inspired, or perhaps over a bottle of wine in another restaurant,
that's
or
different. Yes.
Dijon somewhere else, what else has inspired you on your journey and the dream?
Well, in a sense, the story's never over because it's the nature of stories that they tend to keep growing, and they grow out of our experiences, out of other people's experience about the milieu we live in, the historical context. And there's been so much research. There was very little known about Claire when I wrote The Journey and the Dream. The Journey and the Dream, and the Claire book as well,
Right.
Claire, A Light in the Garden. Since then, there's been enormous amounts of research, especially in women's studies on Claire. And since then, there's been all kinds of research done on the Fifth Crusade and Francis's participation in that with the Sultan Malik al-Kamil. So there's a lot of that kind of thing going on. Would I add anything? I don't know. There's something complete about this book that I think adding something to it would damage the unity or that original gift, being given that gift to do the book. And it was a gift. But I was concerned for years about Francis's father. And I couldn't really write about him because there's no evidence whatsoever that they were ever reconciled. In this book, they're reconciled in Francis's dream. He dreams that he and his father are being reconciled. I was trying to say by that he wanted that, and I wonder if his father wanted that. And also his mother, Lady Pica. I could imagine her when Francis lays his clothes in front of his father and says, "I'll never again call you father, but our Father in heaven." When she sees this estrangement between her son and her husband, that's tough stuff.
Yeah, indeed.
And but I could never write it until about a few years ago, maybe 6 or 7 years ago. I woke up in the middle of the night, maybe 2 o'clock, 2 or 3 in the morning, and this refrain, it wasn't a refrain, it was a line of poetry came to me. And it felt like a refrain. A refrain is a repeated line that comes in the poetry. And so I just started writing, lying in bed with my pencil. You have a pen, it never works if you're lying this way. The ink's running the other. So finally, I wrote, and then I said, that's a good start. I went back to bed, closed my eyes. 5 minutes later, I was wide awake. So I started writing again. Pretty soon I got out of bed and I said, I have to sit down beside the bed here and write this poem. And it came all in a rush. Very few poems come that way. You have to work on them sometimes literally for years before you get it right. It's just not right, doesn't sound right. But this one just kept coming and coming. And so it's on Lady Pica. And you'll see the refrain here. I sure hope I brought the poem. I think I did. Yeah.
As you're looking
Yes.
through your notes there, I just do want to remind people that Sister Margaret Carney published a new biography of St. Clare,
Yes.
Clare Light of Assisi, with Franciscan Media last year. And so that scholarly research continues to this day. And so I'd invite you to pick up a copy as well, take a look at that and see some of the beautiful skills that Sister Margaret Carney brings to the book and to sharing St. Clare's life with us, much as Father Murray did here in The Journey and the Dream.
Okay. So I did find it.
Good.
I should have brought the book. I knew where it was in the book. So the poem itself is called Lady Pica, and you will see what the line that came to me. Francesco, dear one, the empty rooms cry out for you, and under the chimney's hood, the hearth fire burns untended. I sit in an upright chair. It is months now. Your father fusses with palfreys and war horses, while I shun linens and wool dresses, trimmed and lined with fur. And no one sees. I sit by the window. I hear rumors. I stay inside. I sit in an upright chair. There is no song here, except for the birds I hear through the window's oiled parchment. The days are long. Your father roars at the dogs and servants, and we seldom sit by the fire. The night frightens our sleep. Francesco, my son, what have I done? Tell me how it is with you. Knock at the silent door where I wait in an upright chair. They say you are now a leper. Dear one, what has become of you? Your father and I lie abed, stare at the ceiling's wooden beams. Your dog whines mornings. He watches the door. He does not eat. I pat his matted coat. I give you to God, my son. I wait for death. The bells toll under the house. The wind laughs in the leaves. In the eaves, I sit in an upright chair.
Wow.
So there you see the refrain is I sit in an upright chair. And that's what came to me. I saw Lady Pica sitting in that chair. I got the line first, but I said, who's sitting in the upright chair? That's when I started writing, and that's kind of what happened. That's how creativity works. If you let it go, sometimes we don't let it go because we're afraid to, or we don't want to go there, wherever that deep place is. But sometimes it leads us and takes us to them. So you can see that she had to have been much on my mind. And I did the same thing for the father. I wrote a poem about him, how he would feel, his anger, and all of this.
How beautiful and how descriptive. As you've read that tonight, I could just picture that so well. What a gift you have. Thank you for sharing that gift with us.
Thank you.
Just amazing. So your grasp of language, the way you shared that poem with us. Myself, if I read that, I would probably read it from line to line, but there is a way you execute that, a way that is written that it tugs at every part of your being as you visualize the mother sitting in an upright chair, and so thank you for sharing that. And I can't help but wonder, how Francis, you're walking the streets of Assisi. You've been back, I think, a few times since
Yes.
1972. And to smell the smells, to touch the brick, the stone, the earth that is uniquely Umbria, Assisi, the red earth, the red brick that just comes forth. As you described your train ride back to Assisi, I'm going back in time. I've taken that train, or a later one perhaps, and thought the very same thing. That you leave this large metropolitan city of Rome, this bustling train station where everyone is just racing to get their ticket punched and jump on the train. And as someone who didn't speak Italian well, looking at all the signs going, I think that's where I need to go, So I'm saying, I wrap this up with my stories, is how Francis has pointed and directed and inspired your life through your poetry and through your works. And thank you for sharing that. It's amazing. How is Francis inspiring you today? Where is Francis now? And for you and perhaps for us, where is Francis? He's 800 years plus,
He's older than I am.
Yes. Yes. So what is he speaking or saying to us today?
Well, he continues to inspire me, obviously. This is the life that I've embraced, to be a follower of Francis. And I think of him more and more and more because especially of the historical context that we're living in now. I know the United States. I know Italy too, but I've been gone for a couple of years. But there is so much division. There's so much hatred. There's so much uncivility that people can't even be civil to one another so often. There's a kind of a crudeness that's stepping into our country. And so I think of him. He was a poet, he was a troubadour, he was a jongleur, he was a singer, and he wanted to bring people joy and peace. And so he struggled all of his life to become a peaceful person. If I'm trying to make peace, but I'm filled with anger, please don't go to New York or Geneva and make peace. You have to be yourself a peaceful person. And he struggled to do that. And I think people saw that in him, especially the people in his own town. They knew he was nutty. He went to war. He had post-traumatic stress probably most of his life. And so, they're scandalized by him at the beginning, and, and he becomes a source of division in his own family between him and his father and his mother. And, it just was all of that. And yet he kept working to bring people Christ. And the name of that is peace. If you bring people Christ, you'll bring them peace. It'll at least be peace of heart, peace of soul. And so I think of him a lot, and the need of his vision as well, because he was bigger than his town, bigger than his family. He was always thinking out of the box, pressing the envelope. As soon as he has his deepest conversion, he leaves town. He comes out from the protective walls of a medieval city. It goes first to Gubbio, where he had a friend. More and more scholars are saying this, that was probably someone he fought with in the war. So they were war buddies and probably went through the same kind of traumas. And then he comes back and he lives with the lepers outside of Assisi. And at that time, to go outside of the walls of a city was to enter a dangerous world. There were robbers, there were thieves, it was not safe out there. That's why they had gates on the city and they closed at night. The Roman Empire had collapsed. There aren't all kinds of people out there protecting. And but he went. He pushed that, and he went to those who were considered bad. Some people even looked upon lepers as evil. That was probably why they had leprosy, they said. And so Francis put the lie to that and went and worked among them and found joy, sweetness of soul and body, he said, when he worked with the lepers. So we need that vision today. We need to go out of our smaller world, whatever that small world is. It could be a country. It could be myself. I'm my small world. And I have to come out of that and risk, but I have to risk in Christ and with Christ. And the gospel is risking. If you preach the gospel and live it, it's a big risk. It doesn't fit in with the values of our time.
Indeed.
Or any time.
Anytime.
Come to think of it.
Okay. Indeed. Thank you. As you were speaking and sharing with that, I'm reminded, of Francis's canticle of the creatures.
Oh.
And that in difficult time, he was able to pen a poem and to sing a poem. Perhaps that resonates with you as well, poet to poet, but to live with, to embrace, to be vulnerable, means to embrace everything, everyone, all before you. And the Canticle Creatures is a beautiful poem, but it's also probably more than a poem.
Yeah, it's a real poem. It's the first great Italian poem written in the Umbrian dialect, not in Latin, where most of the poetry was written in Latin. This is a vernacular poem. Even Dante said it was the first great poem before his. So he practically wrote the Italian language, invented it in the Divine Comedy. And the Francis is his dialect. But it's interesting, when I read the poem about Lady Pica, he had the same kind of experience. That came out all in a rush. So he had been doing that his whole life. He knew how to sing a poem. He was a singer. It was sung. We don't know what the melody was, whether it was something original or it was an extant troubadour melody, or it was the exultet of the Mass of Holy Saturday, because that does fit the words. So, but he was a true poet. So it's like a prolonged Freudian slip. Everything he says reveals his own inner world. G.K. Chesterton said that if you know the Canticle of the Creatures, you will know Francis of Assisi. And I think that's pretty true, because he takes the four elements of the universe, earth, water, fire, and air, and for medievals, the whole world was made up of those four elements. And they were also interior elements. They were called the four humors. If you had too much water, you were melancholy. You know, if you had too much earth, you were phlegmatic. So anyway, he takes these and for the first time puts them in binary sexual combinations. Brother sun, sister moon, brother fire, sister water, brother air, sister earth, or mother, sister. So he's embracing all of creation inside and out. So it's a both cosmic poem and it's a psychic poem. And he praises God through these elements. And it's an extraordinary poem, and it's a course to talk about the whole catalog, canticle. You'd have to take a course, maybe a couple courses, because it is that profound and that resonant.
Thank you. Thank you. We talked a little bit about the past, how the origin story and what's brought us to this point. We talked about Francis's, today. What about tomorrow? What's the dream, Murray? What's your dream?
You want me to stand up and sing tomorrow?
If you'd like, that'd be fine.
Oh my. Well, what I've learned about dream, in that sense that you're using it, is that it involves a lot of waiting. And right now I'm waiting. I know something will come, something will click. I might even wake up at 2 a.m. and something comes to me. Who knows? But I have my own personal dream, of course, and the personal dream is always that the gospel can really be lived, and that it can be the basis of our loves, of the things that we create and make, including societies, for us. But it's not just the gospel. We have to be bigger than the gospel. We have to be able to embrace all religions, all of those that impinge on the divine, and the divine has impinged on those religions. It's very important, because the danger when things start to fall apart in a society is that people try to legislate morality. They try to make laws to force people to do what is right, and that never works. You can't legislate morality. You can only inspire it, live it, and be graced by it. We need laws, and we have to have laws in a society, but when religions start to lose their oomph, their spirit, and they're not really connected to the divine, then people get frightened. And you say, well, now pass a law. And so everybody has to come to church 4 times a day. Pass that, and that'll save us. That won't save us. Laws, we can do them. I mean, you read St. Paul on law. It is faith, it is grace that saves us. And it is grace that saves societies. So each one of us are just tiny little cogs, but very, very important cogs in this emerging world that's going to happen. And it's going to happen. I'm a very optimistic person that we're coming to a new birth. A new birth is happening. I don't know what it is. I'm not a prophet or anything like that, but I know in my heart it's going to happen. And I am so happy that within that I can embrace the Franciscan charism, because I believe it is a gospel charism. If it's lived the way Francis and the early friars and friars now and in the future are trying to live their life. What was your question? It was, I know it was something about tomorrow.
Tomorrow. That's, I think you did a wonderful job, but thank you. But what does Francis have for us? What does Francis tell us? What words does Francis have for us tomorrow?
What words
my
does
original,
Francis,
you went in that direction, but I think
did-
the original question was, what is your dream? What is
Francis's dream? What does
Francis's
Francis do?
what's next?
Yeah.
You know,
The wonderful thing about Francis is he was very practical. And towards the end of his life, when you would ask him that question, he said, I have done what was mine to do. May the Lord show you what is yours. You know, he wasn't thinking that he had to save the world or that he had a vision for the world, but he responded to the word that was given to him. And his wish for us is that the Lord will show us, each of us, what is ours to do.
and there it is.
Okay.
That nugget that we too will know what is ours to do. Trying to think of an author that you know your vocation when the world's needs and your gifts come together. And I think Francis found his vocation because he responded to the world's needs and used his gifts.
His gifts.
As
That's a very good quote.
whoever, yes,
I didn't write it.
you did
I?
not,
No.
but neither did I.
I didn't think I did.
No. Thank you for your sharing tonight.
Thank you.
I have a couple, 5 more minutes here tonight, and I have some questions that were submitted.
Okay.
Would you be open to responding to a couple?
I will try. Yes.
Okay. All right. One of the first questions that came through my email was, what are you writing now? What can we expect from Father Murray Bodo, OFM?
Well, right now I'm writing mainly poems. They happen to be coming to me because I've been blessed to have been in a couple of contemplative situations. One by a beautiful lake in Canada, and whenever I'm in that kind of milieu or just the feel, the smell of things, what I hear, it just has something to do with whatever it is that triggers poetry. But I'm also, for Franciscan Media, I'm trying to write but one more book on prayer. But I'm trying to once again, try to get at the core of it. But I'm waiting. I'm about on page 30, something like that. And the next morning I said, and nothing was coming. I said, I might have to wait for a few months before more comes, because I kind of just stopped there. So I'm kind of stopped. But and I don't even know that's going to be the book.
Sure.
Because that often happens. You start on something, and in the middle of it, you'll start writing something, and you say, well, that's the book. And then you put this one aside, and then you start with that. So, but I don't have, I do have a story, but it would have to be a novel, and it's about Brother Pacifico who was a troubadour, one of the followers of Francis, but I'm struggling with that. The writing sounds good, but there's no plot. It's just nothing's happening. I
Okay.
said, if something doesn't happen, I'm going to fall asleep at the page, waiting for something to happen in the book. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Another question, and I found this, kind of funny, but also very informative, a good question. Traveling to Assisi, do you have any recommendations to get a taste of Assisi? A restaurant, a little bar, places not to miss that are off the beaten path, perhaps? Is there a little gelato, that you don't want to miss out on?
Well, I'm Italian.
Mm.
So anywhere you eat in Italy is going to be wonderful.
Okay.
It can be a little side place in a hole in the wall place. The food will be wonderful. But that's a part of getting to know Assisi. Don't go to Assisi and eat American food or French food or German food. Eat the food of the people. Do what the people do, and then you get a feel of what it was like in Francis's day. The place is so medieval. The very buildings, everything has that. Feel the stones. And you don't have to go into the basilica where he's buried right away or anything like that. I always tell people, if they're on their own, go to the places you're drawn to. This is so interesting. I want to go see that, and then go see it. Then find out afterwards what it is. What was that place? Or what went on there? What was happening? Because we're drawn to the places that are somehow responding to something inside us that we need to connect to. It could be just a quiet little alleyway, or it could be anything. You might want to just go walk up the side of the mountain and sit down and feel the earth. That is the way I think to go to any country, is to try to make it your own. Now, if you're with a group, it's different. They're going to be pointing this out and that out, and and depending on who the guides are, they will have their own agenda. So you kind of say, what do I want to see? That was one of the wonderful things when I went to Assisi to write The Journey and the Dream. I didn't know anything. I'd never been out of the States, and here I'm in a foreign country. I'm in the Middle Ages. I'm in the 13th century, and it felt that way. In fact, the very first night I was staying with the Sisters of the Atonement, and that's where I wrote the book, in room number 12, they tell me. I didn't remember that, but that's where I wrote the book. And the first morning I was, and I was tired. I was afraid of, I can't write or anything. And I woke up, and it's right near the Piazza of St. Clair. And I opened my shutters in the morning, and there were horses out there in medieval costumes. I just closed them. I said, I've gone completely over the bend. I'm nuts. Then I sneaked and looked a little bit more, and it said, so I went down. Sister Rosita was the head of the head honcho. And I asked her, I said, Sister, are there horses and medieval people out there? And she started laughing. She said, yes, they are preparing for Calendi Maggio, the calends of May, where they were practicing, because they celebrate and do medieval things. but it was like, my gosh, now I even know what the costumes look like. And so I think that's why the writing came so well, because I went crazy. I started hallucinating and seeing horses and all kinds of things.
We are inspired in many ways.
We were
aren't we?
inspired in many
Many
ways.
ways. Well, I wanted just to say thank you, Father Murray.
You're welcome.
Our time is coming to an end. For everyone who's joined us here at the National Shrine of St. Anthony, thank you. Thank you, Brother Vince and the friars here.
Yes.
Your generosity and hospitality, I'm very grateful for. Thank you for all your help and assistance. It is a pleasure to be with you in person and virtually. And I hope this has been you didn't want to have a big party. You didn't want to have any large event. You wanted something intimate, something where a few people could gather
Yes.
and you could share. And I think I feel very blessed that you shared so much with us in just an hour. It's been a very rich time with you. So thank you.
Yes.
For
And it worked.
everything.
It worked. Your idea worked. Thank you for the idea. You know,
You're
and
welcome.
this is
Thank you for
this
saying
is-
yes.
this is very good.
I didn't want you standing up here for a full hour
Yeah,
and gracing us with
no,
that,
no,
but give you a little.
It's very
time.
nice.
So,
Yeah.
thank you, Murray. So I hope that you've enjoyed. Please let me know if there's anything you'd like to see us do in the future. I'd love to have some more opportunities here, Brother Vince and friars, with some of our other Franciscan Media authors. So thank you. May God bless you on your journey and in your dreams. And thank you, Murray, for sharing both.
Thank you. Thank all of you here and on the Zoom. Thank you.
Thank you.